tips and tricks for the Power BI service. Before I hand it over to Dennis, I just wanted to go a quick rundown of a little bit about who Collectiv is and what we're all about. So Collectiv is a strategy and consulting firm. We're based out of Chicago. However, we are 100% virtual and have over 120 plus consultants all across the US and within some in Canada as well. We focus within the analytics, FP&A, and AI and ML space. And we tend to focus all of those types of supports, implementation, and strategy offerings through the Microsoft stack. So we utilize tools like Microsoft Power BI, which we'll be teaching you about today, Microsoft Power Apps, Power Automate, and then of course all the associated Azure services that accompany all of those different tools. So, if there's any type of data storage, data movement, we usually use Azure to facilitate those types of needs. And again, we help organizations all the way from strategy all the way to support. So if your organization is looking for, how do we actually get started with Power BI? How do we get started with Power Apps? Data storage, anything along those lines. We come in, we put together a strategy for you and your team, and then we roll that out through an implementation plan. And then upon implementation completion, then it comes down to support and how do you support what's been put in place? How do you, if you have questions about Power BI, if you have questions about some Power Apps, Power Automate, anything along those lines, we can help you in that aspect as well. But that's pretty well the gist of what Collectiv is all about. If you would like to learn a little bit more about us, we're always here to help. Visit our website that you can see here on the screen. But I know the reason that we're all on here today is to learn about what Dennis has to speak to us about, which is the Power BI service. As Audrey mentioned on the call already, if you're interested in learning more about Collectiv, we do have these Collectiv Academy events every Thursday. So feel free to sign up. But with that said, please, I'm going to hand it over to Dennis. So the floor is yours, and looking forward to your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Greg and Audrey. I appreciate the intro. Welcome, everybody. Today we'll be talking about one of my favorite topics with Power BI, and that is the Power BI service. So I kind of wanted to go over just a brief overview of the Power BI service. But before I do that, I would like to go ahead and review the forms that Audrey had put a link to in the chat. And I kind of want to go over the responses to see what everybody would like to learn and get out of today's Collectiv Academy. So we have 7 responses so far. I really appreciate everybody. If you've not responded, please go in and do so, and we'll try to review each and everybody's feedback. So out of what we would like to learn today, I see we have some best practices, tips and tricks. What can we do with the Power BI service? Any new abilities in the Power BI service that we should be aware of? And that seems like it. So all best practices, tips and tricks, I'll try to cover as much as possible as time allows. But like I said, if you have any more feedback, any questions throughout the meeting, throughout Collectiv Academy, please post that in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand and we'll try to answer it. If I'm not able to answer your question, then we'll take note of that and we can follow up after the meeting. So what is the Power BI service? Everybody hears about it when you're first starting with Power BI. You have Power BI Desktop, the service, report builder. There's a bunch of different features, different applications within Power BI. But what Power BI service is, it's sort of a web-based application that you can publish your reports to. And through that, once you publish, you can actually share those reports to different users throughout your organization. It's a great way to be able to basically share different reports, data sets, different analysis that you've completed, and be able to share that throughout your organization. So throughout this training, I kind of separated the tips and tricks, best practices into 2 different sections. The first would be administration. So if you're an admin or you're actually somebody publishing reports to the service, I think these best practices and tips and tricks will really interest you and be helpful to your organization. It will, once you master the Power BI service, I think that really leads into Power BI adoption within your organization. So, every organization, if they're implementing Power BI, they always ask, how can we get users and employees throughout our organization to be able to adopt it? Well, I think if the people that were actually implementing Power BI within your organization knew the Power BI service like the back of their hand, then you would really be more efficient at that. And I think it'd be very helpful. So hopefully we'll be able to cover that through the first part. The second part is sort of more of an end user look. So if you're the person, maybe you build a few reports, but you also consume reports a lot, being able to know these tips and tricks and best practices while doing so will improve efficiency both for you, but also for the people that are building the reports and sharing them with you. So I'm kind of separating this. We'll go over just a few slides throughout the Collectiv Academy, and then I'll actually switch over to a live demo so I can show y'all where to go in the Power BI service to do these tips and tricks. So we'll be able to go through the whole process live. So like I said, the first part is administration. I have just 5 tips and tricks, best practices that I think if you were to implement, it would greatly improve the use of Power BI within your organization. And I think Power BI service makes these tasks, these best practices, very easy to complete. So the first is actually separating your data set and report PBIX files. So whenever you're creating your reports and your analysis, if you have one file just for your data set and you publish that file, all of your measures, all of your data sources will be in that file. Then you can publish that to the Power BI service. And then people throughout your organization will actually be able to use that data set. And you can basically open up a different Power BI file just for your report. And you could go, when you click Get Data, you can click Power BI data sets, and then you go choose that data set that you've published up there. And you can also share that with different people throughout your organization so they can consume that data set as well. That's one of the biggest pieces that I think really create a center of reporting and analysis that basically says, hey, we know we've created this data set. It's been tested. We know it works. We know it's displaying the correct information. Let me pass that to our organization. And that's what that's meant to do. So you can have as many reports sourced from that data set as you want. There's really no limit. So I highly recommend doing that. You can also create the report off the data set and then publish that to a different workspace within your Power BI service. So that data set does not need to exist in every single workspace that you have. It could just be one workspace, maybe called Power BI data sets or your organization data sets. And you could plug reports into that. I really find that creates a really great process for your organization, and it will enhance adoption. The second bullet, so creating workspaces for different dev, test, and production. So following the application lifecycle management process when developing reports, I think is extremely important. There's a few ways you could do that. If you're in a just regular pro workspace, so you're using pro licenses, creating 3 different workspaces for this. So one could say reports development, reports test, and reports production. So as you're working through your report, you're making changes to it, you're following whatever your end users have specified, then I would do all of that work in your development workspace. Once you've got it to a great point and you're ready to pass it to the user to test different information, You can publish that. Basically, the process that I follow is I download that report or data set from the development workspace, and then I publish it back up to the test workspace, and then I can actually share that report out of the test workspace to the users that I need to share it with, so they can test the data and make sure that it's all correct. And then obviously, once we've tested and we know it's all correct, the information's there, and the visualizations, the measures that we've created meet expectations, then you can download from that test workspace and then publish it back up to the production workspace. And then in the production workspace, I always recommend actually creating an app. So creating a Power BI app. I'll be showing that later in the presentation, but being able to distribute your reports through that app in your production workspace will greatly enhance the way you can distribute your analysis. So the third bullet point, promoting and certifying data sets. So, a big piece with this is that once you've created your data sets, there's a feature in the Power BI service that you can actually promote or certify your data sets. So essentially, you would do this after that data set's been tested. Everything is working correctly. It's displaying the same information as your source is. So that's the most important part. Well, then you can promote that and certify that. And if any of your users, your end users, were using that data set, they would actually see in Power BI or Excel, however they're sourcing the data set, that it's promoted and certified. So it's a great feature to be able to show your organization that we've tested this data set and it's ready for use. I would like to go back to the second bullet point, creating workspaces for ALM. If you are using a premium workspace, then you can actually use deployment pipelines within your workspace. So essentially what that is, it'll allow you to publish to a dev pipeline. And then just by the click of a button, you can move from dev to test. And the same thing, just a click of a button, test to production. So it's a whole pipeline. I think it's a really great feature within the Power BI service. And again, that's with premium licenses. So you would have to have a premium workspace. And one other thing to keep in mind is that in order to deploy between dev, test, and production in a deployment pipeline, that user that's deploying also needs to have a premium license. So that's very important when using deployment pipelines. But the first way that I said, you could just create different workspaces for development, test, and production. That would allow you just to use your regular Pro workspace if that's what you're working with. So the fourth bullet point, distributing reports and dashboards via Power BI apps. So I've kind of talked about this already. I think when you're talking about Power BI adoption and people looking at reports, sort of getting out of the Excel or your other reporting system mindset, I think as you create reports and then dashboards off of those reports, you can actually add that collection to an app. So you get one app per workspace in the Power BI service. And essentially all you would do is update the app each time you have an update to a report or dashboard. So let's say you were working in your application lifecycle management. You have a development workspace, a test workspace, and a production workspace. You could have an app for each one of those. And every time you're ready for somebody to look at that analysis, you could publish to an app and then share that app with the user. And I'll actually go into that in more detail when I do the live demo. So the last bullet point for administration is viewing usage metrics reports. So I feel like, I've noticed that this is not always a widely used feature, but what this allows you to do is actually go into the Power BI service, pull the usage metrics report, and you'll actually be able to see who's been accessing the report, how often they've been accessing it. What I like to do is have a monthly review of my workspaces that I manage. And I'll go view the usage metrics and see, what reports have actively been used in the last month. If they haven't been used, let's say one of the reports just goes stale and nobody's really using it anymore, I would kind of go to the end users and say, we built this report and we've noticed it hasn't really been used recently. Should we go in and make changes to the report and then republish and hopefully it'll be adopted. But viewing those usage metrics reports will allow you that insight into the usage of all of the reports that you've built. So I find that that's a not very widely used, but it's extremely effective in actually creating Power BI adoption within your organization. So whenever I get into the Power BI service, also the end users come to mind. So, people actually going in and consuming the reports that we're building. So kind of three main subjects when, as an end user, creating alerts and subscriptions. So with this, alerts are typically created against a dashboard tile. So I'll show that later, but basically what that is, say you have a specific KPI that's basically number of users. So number of inactive users, and you don't want any inactive users within your organization, then you could create a measure and add that to a KPI visual in your report. And then you pin that KPI visual to a dashboard. Once you do that, you can go into the dashboard and actually click and set an alert. And basically, we could say, if this KPI goes over 1, then send us an email, send us a notification that we have an inactive user in our organization. So, alerts are super important, and I think, allow more timely, noticing things more timely within your organization when it comes to reporting and KPI reporting. So subscriptions, those are sort of similar to alerts, but you can actually create subscriptions to a specific report, so an entire report, or just one dashboard. So basically what this does, you can say, I want to send an email, send a subscription to myself every day at 8 a.m. And you can go in and set that. You can say, I want a screenshot of the report at that time. I also want a link to the report. So whenever I get that email at 8 a.m., I can just click the link. It'll bring me to that report. So that's sort of what a subscription is used for. I find them really effective when I need to go review something daily or weekly. I can go set that occurrence in a subscription. So using bookmarks to save go-to views. So say you have specific filters that you use every time you enter a report. Well, you can actually just create a bookmark in the service. And every time you navigate to that report, you can set that bookmark as your default view. And it will actually filter the report the way you would filter it every single day. So it kind of saves time, but you can also save multiple bookmarks. So if you're just reviewing different pieces of that report every day, then you can go in and create those bookmarks and have that set for you. And then the last sort of step for end users is using favorites to navigate quickly to different apps, dashboards, and reports. So almost every component within the Power BI service, components being apps, reports, or dashboards, will have a star next to it at some point, and you can actually select the star, and then in the favorites tab in the Power BI service, all of those things will pop up. So all you have to do when you go into powerbi.com is click favorites, and all of your favorites will appear there. I find it's very efficient and saves you time when you're trying to navigate to the different apps and reports. And especially if you have maybe 20 workspaces, maybe 100 reports throughout those workspaces, but you really only need 2 or 3 of the reports to look at every day, you go favorite those, and you can just go to your favorites tab, and those 2 will be there every time. So, before we go into the live demo, I kind of wanted to show the architecture of the first bullet point in administration. So separating your data set and report into multiple PBIX files. That is one of the most significant best practices that I feel a lot of organizations do not do, but it's very important to separate your data set files and your report files. Basically, what I mean when we say that, let's say we have 3 different data sources going into a Power BI data set. Maybe one from Azure SQL, from SharePoint, Microsoft Dataverse, and maybe you have a Power BI data flow in there as well. Well, all of those sources are brought together by a Power BI data set. So you can go to get data when you're in desktop and actually get the information from each of those. So once you create the data set, you can do your testing, you can do the typical ALM process, and go from dev to test the prod with that data set. And then once it's in production, you can go in and certify that that data set has been tested, all the information in that data set is correct. Then it's ready to be consumed by Power BI. And then with one of the recent updates to Power BI, you can now source different data sets with Excel. So you can actually see Power BI data sets in Excel. And just briefly, the way you do that is if you're in Excel, you click Get Data, then there will be a new feature that says From Power BI. And whenever you select that, you can go and look at all the data sets and you can see whether they're promoted or certified. So it's the same process as if you were to do that in Power BI, but it's just a recent feature that came out. So this is the whole architecture of the solution best practice that I would create if I were to create a report from scratch. So any questions before I move into the live demo? Okay, let me go check the forums real quick to see if we have any recent responses. So what level of Power BI license needed to use the Power BI service? So this is one of the recent questions in our forum. So the Power BI service is for Pro and for Premium licenses. And actually, I did this yesterday. You can go in, and if you just want to test out the Power BI service to see if it's going to work for your organization, you can go sign up for a free trial. And I think it's either a 60 or a 90-day trial that you could use. And basically, that would allow you access to use the different features within the Power BI service and see if it's going to fit your organization. And then what additional features are expected in the near future? So Power BI basically rolls out an update to Power BI. Microsoft rolls out an update to Power BI. Maybe it's once a month, and different features are added. You can actually go to Microsoft's website, actually go to the Power BI website and click updates, and you can actually see what features are coming out. Hopefully certain features within the premium capacity will be rolled out as generally available soon. Nobody can say for certain, but hopefully the deployment pipelines maybe one day will be generally available. So that's my hopes and dreams, but we'll see how Microsoft gets there. I would consider going to the Power BI website and seeing all of those features. You can also view the Power BI roadmap, so you can see where Microsoft wants to take Power BI. So that was rolled out a few weeks ago. So let me go ahead and pull up the Power BI service. So for anybody that has never been in the Power BI service, it's pretty simple to navigate. If you go to powerbi.com and you click sign in, if you have an active license, it'll just take that into account and bring you into your workspaces. So you have all of these options on the left-hand side. If you're looking for a specific report, all reports will be published to a workspace. So all of your workspaces are here. You also have your personal workspace. So if you're just working on a report for yourself, then I would consider publishing it to my workspace. But if you're working on a report that's going to be consumed by many people, I would consider creating a new workspace specifically to contain that different analysis that's being completed. So essentially, when I was showing y'all the architecture of separating out your data set files and your report files, this is sort of what it looks like. So basically, you have your data set file, and then you would have multiple reports. So your report is this logo here, your data set's this logo here, and you could have multiple reports sourced from this data set, and that's just a live query to that data set. So whenever your data set refreshes, those reports will automatically be refreshed as well. So it'll create just a whole ecosystem of Power BI analysis. So creating workspaces for development, test, and production. So how do we follow that application lifecycle management process? What I would consider doing is creating a workspace for dev, for test, and production. So you could have 3 different workspaces, and it's very simple. All you do is go create workspace. You can upload a specific image to the workspace. It can be whatever you want. And then you could say workspace name. So give this a descriptive title. So whenever somebody goes and navigates into the workspace, they know exactly what it's for. And the same thing with your Power BI reports and your data sets. I would spend some time actually naming things the way they should be named. So, if it's a sales report, then make sure you say this is sales analysis. And then the workspace would be a sales workspace. So it's very simple to create a workspace. Let's say you wanted to create the workspace. There's an advanced tab here. You drop that down. The contact list is the workspace admin. So once you create the workspace, you can actually go in and start adding users to that workspace, or you can add the whole organization. I would be careful with that because usually when you create the workspace and start publishing reports, that kind of triggers emails to be sent. So be aware of that. So if you wanted to create a workspace with a premium capacity, you had the approval to do so because it does cost more money for that to work. You could just turn it on this way. So that's what I would do for your dev, test, and your production workspaces if you were on a pro license. So that's sort of an important feature, maybe topic to discuss. And then for premium, you will have access to the deployment pipelines. So that would solve your ALM process. So the third topic that we had talked about was promoting and actually certifying your data sets. So once you've created your data set, it's been tested and you're ready for users to start consuming that data, I would consider using the endorsement feature. So you see the data set, I have it as promoted. So that means, I've created it, tested it, I'm ready for people to consume it. And they can see that endorsement whenever they source that data set from Power BI or Excel. So they'll actually see that this is promoted. I see the data set name. This is what that person told me. Let's go ahead and build that new report based off of it. So to do that, if you hover over your data set, you click the 3 dots next to here, more options, drop down and go to settings. So you'll be very familiar with this. If you have a gateway, this is where you configure your gateway, configure your scheduled refresh for your data set. But then down here, you have the endorsement. So this was rolled out maybe a few months ago, this endorsement feature. So basically what it does, you'll see here, if you don't want to endorse the data set, maybe you're just using that data set, you're not really sharing it, then maybe I would consider using none, but I would always consider endorsing so people actually know and get that clarity that this data set has been tested and it's ready to be used. So you have 2 options after that, and you could promote it. So that means it's basically ready for consumption. And then certifying it means that your organization has set a specific criteria to be able to certify a data set, and that data set has passed all of that criteria. That's when you're going to be able to certify it. And then you can also enter a description. So I would consider doing this every time somebody sources that data set, uses that data set in analysis, they would see that description and be able to know, okay, this is the correct one I need to use. So a combination of the endorsement and your description would give the user basically good visibility into what that data set's supposed to do. So the next piece is distributing reports and dashboards in the Power BI service and distributing that via an app. So if you're in my workspace, you can't actually create an app for your personal workspace. Apps can only be created against a public workspace, so one that has already been created for a specific use. So for example, I have this workspace. It's called Collectiv Academy, Power BI Service Tips and Tricks. So I created this workspace specifically for this session. And you see now I have the option up here to create and update that app. Since I've already created an app in this, it just says, let's go ahead and update the app. So you can do so then. So let's say we have a dashboard, we have a report. I want to share this information to my organization. I can go to update app, and if the app's not created, they'll say create app, but it's the same thing. So I give my app a name, a description, a support site. So if you have some sort of intranet within your organization, you can actually put a link in here. You can actually add a logo for your app as well. You give it a theme color. So that's sort of similar to the theme colors within Power BI Desktop. You have a few options. And then contact information. So let's say you're the Power BI admin within your organization, and you want to be displayed your name on that app. So if people have issues, they can contact you. Make sure you have Show App Publisher selected when you're creating this. And then navigation. So you can customize the way you want your app to look. So basically the navigation of that app here. So I have a report, the report link. Then you can create actually different sections. So let's say you created an app for sales. You wanted to do maybe sales order analysis. Maybe sales orders will be a section. Maybe another section will be pricing for customers. And then all of your reports related to pricing will be in that section. So that's one way to kind of segment your analysis so people aren't confused when there are so many reports within that app. So the last part of creating an app is permissions. So here I have 2 options. When I create this app, if I want the entire organization to have access to it, you can just select entire organization, and then people, you can share the app and they won't really have to do anything. They can just go into it. Or if this is, kind of private information, confidential information, then I would consider just entering certain people. Maybe your vice president team needs access to these reports, but nobody else. I would just give access to that app to those specific people. And then down here, when creating the app, what sort of access do you want the end users to have when accessing that? So do you want them to be able to use the data sets within that app for their own analysis? So you can turn that on or off. Do you want the users to be able to copy that report and sort of customize it the way they want? You can allow that as well. So there's two different options. You have the build permission and the share permission. Right now I have the build selected, but if I just want users to be able to have access to it whenever I share it with them, then I would just select share button and only enter a certain amount of users within that. And then you have the app link. So if you just want to send somebody to the app, say a hyperlink within an email, you can copy this link and put it there. So that is a Power BI app. I find it extremely useful when distributing your Power BI reports. It's extremely important, and especially with the new feature, object level security, you can actually lock down specific tables within your report, and within an app, it will follow that object level security. So the fifth bullet point from administration is viewing the usage metrics report. So it's pretty simple to do. So if I was in my workspace and I wanted to go view my usage metrics report, I already have one here because I already created it. But let's say that was not there. You can go to more options in the report and click view usage metrics. So again, if you have any report within your workspace and you want to see usage metrics on it, you hover over, click the dots, and click view usage metrics report. So what this does, it'll show all of the views, everything that's happened to the report, when they have viewed it, compared to the rest of the reports in your organization, how does it rank? So I'll go into the one that I've already created, and I could see, okay, this is filtered on for this specific report. If I wanted to see usage metrics on all of the reports within my organization, I can just erase that filter, and there we go. So we can see all of the views, what day those happened, when the last one happened. So I think it's an important feature to know. And one thing I didn't have in the PowerPoint, but I think is also extremely useful, is viewing the lineage of a specific report or data set. So right under viewing your usage metrics, if you go view lineage, it'll actually show you, okay, this report is sourced from this data set. This data set is sourced from this Excel file. So let's say you had many sources that go into the data set, sort of like that, the diagram that I showed in the PowerPoint. Well, here you'll see all of your sources, your data set, and then you could have multiple reports sourced to this data set. And that lineage view kind of allows you to see that. So again, viewing usage metrics, it's extremely important, and it'll help you sort of keep reports up to date within your organization. So kind of that was our last little piece of administration. If anybody has any questions, feel free to enter those in the chat or raise your hand. We'd be happy to answer them. So if not, I will move into the end users. So if I were going in and consuming these reports as an end user within the Power BI service, what features, what can I use to enhance that ability? So the first one was creating alerts and subscriptions to specific reports. So to do that, I would consider going into your workspace where that app or that report is located, actually going into the report. And then you notice here, we have a subscribe button. So you have a bunch of options here, but if you were to select the subscribe, we can add a new subscription. Who do we want to subscribe to this? Maybe it's just myself. So you can see exactly who is going to be sent an email, the subject, some sort of description, which report page you want to show, and then how often, so what frequency. Do you want it daily, hourly, weekly, or monthly? You can select that. You can also say after a data refresh. So this option is only going to let you send it once a day, but it'll be after a refresh, which sometimes could be important if you're looking at sensitive information. And you could say scheduled time. So if I want it at 9:45, or if you just want it at 8:45, and then you can select your time zone as well. And then if I wanted to start on it today, so it'll default to today, and you could set an end date as well. I think important, what do you want to include in that email when you receive it? You want access to the report. So let's say you are sharing that with a user that doesn't have access to the workspace or that report already. Well, if you subscribe them to that and you click access to this report, that's going to give them access to the report, and they don't have it already. So I'd keep that in mind. And then you can include a link to the report and a preview image. So I really love the preview image feature because it'll kind of give you a snapshot of where that report and how it's looking right now. So let's move. I think we have a question in the chat. So it says, how do I understand that the data set and reports are separate here? The easiest way that I would go look at that is the lineage view. So if you were to go look at the lineage view in the report, most of the time it will have a different name than here. In this case, this is just one file. This is just a data set and report file for this Collectiv Academy. That's how I created it. But you would be able to see it this way, and you could have multiple reports. So if you had more than one report here, you would know that it's live querying this data set. And in this example, I actually have a dashboard created off of this report, and it'll show that lineage all the way back to the source. So how do I create alerts against that dashboard? So it's very simple. If you were in a report, you had a KPI that you wanted to receive an alert for, all you have to do is hover over that visual. In this case, I have an average price KPI. I pin. So pinning visual means you're adding it to a dashboard. In this case, I've already done it. So it's an existing dashboard called average price. All you have to do is select pin. So if you go back to your workspace components, you'll see here's that average price dashboard. This is what it looks like. It's just one tile, and I can hover over, click the three ellipses, and click Manage Alerts. So what this is going to do, sort of like the subscriptions, you'll have some similar options here. You can put a title in, and I want to say, if this price ever drops below 8,600, send me an email, because that's when there might be an issue. At most, do I want it every 24 hours, so every day, or at most once an hour? So it depends on the KPI that you're looking at. But I would consider, you might be receiving a lot of emails already. So if you click at most once an hour, you could receive that every hour of the day, depending on how often that average price changes. So by default, it will send you an email. If you don't want an email sent to you and you just want a notification within the Power BI service, you can uncheck that. but by default, it's always selected, and I would consider leaving that on as well. All right, so the next part is before we start answering questions. So after this, feel free to start asking questions. You'll notice how do we add reports and dashboards to your favorites. So if you have, like I said earlier, maybe 20 workspaces, maybe 100 reports throughout your organization, but you really only look at 2 reports, I would consider saving those to your favorites. And it's very simple. All you have to do, hover over and click the star, hover over your dashboard, click the star, and you'll notice if I'm not hovering over, everything that's a favorite will have that black star next to it. And you could go to your favorites and you'll see, okay, there's the report and there's the dashboard in my favorites already. So we have about 10 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions, concerns? I'll go through the forms one more time prior to any messages in the chat as well.
Hi, Dennis. I have a question, please.
Yes.
I need to return back to the first step, which is separate the report from the data set. Now, as I'm understanding now, it's so I need to create, like, example, my view. Example, I am connecting to SQL Server and Excel. So I will create it in the first Power BI file and publish it to the Power BI services.
Correct.
So, correct. And second time, I open a new file, new Power BI files, and this Power BI files I will connect to the dataset in the Power BI services, right? And,
yes, exactly.
And use the Power BI dataset existing in the Power BI services and generate the report, right?
Exactly.
And after that, publish it, this one, as a report. So this is what, okay, that's clear. But here, okay, yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, it's clear now. Now this benefit is giving me, yeah, I can connect many data set. Okay, fine, great. I would like to return you to one basic question, okay? What is the difference between report and dashboard? Because it's literally confusing me. Both, it's the same, I see it.
So the difference between a report and a dashboard, that's a great question. Whenever you are creating your report in the Power BI desktop, you have different pages. Each one of those pages is a page within a report. And then when you publish that up, all of those pages will exist in a single report here. So the combination of all of these pages is your report. And then let's say you had a specific visual within a report that you want to pin and look at, say the average price. Once you pin that, you're creating a dashboard now. So let's create a new dashboard, and let's just call it new dashboard and click pin. So what that just did, it created a dashboard off of a report. So it's different segments of reports. And I can kind of go into the dashboard and see exactly what it looks like. So if I go into that new dashboard, it'll show up here. You can customize it the way you want it. You can pin multiple visuals to the same report. And those visuals can come from, pin multiple visuals to the same dashboard. And those visuals, those different tiles is what they're called, don't have to come from the same report, actually. So if you have 3 reports here, if you had 3 of these in this workspace, they're all displaying different information. You could actually go in and pin different visualizations to the same dashboard, and you kind of get a collective view of all of those visualizations. And another cool feature, if you were to select your average price tile, it'll actually bring you to the report page that tile exists on.
Okay, great. But always when I do like refreshing my file, the Power BI dashboard is damaged. I need to pin it again. I mean, every time I publish the reports, it's giving me error in the dashboard. I need to pin it again. Is this happening correct, or there is something wrong I'm doing?
Do you make any changes to that dashboard, whether it be the visual or any calculations within that visual?
Maybe I'm doing, yeah, like the data set, it was existing with him with the same report. Maybe I change the data set sometimes.
That's what I would think. They shouldn't change. Like if you leave it unchanged and you just publish a new version, that tile still should be pinned to that dashboard. It should still work. But if any changes are made to that, then that's when you might need to repin that to your dashboard.
So that's meaning the data set, if it's changing the data set, it will be need to repin, you mean? Or any calculation DAX measures.
So yeah, exactly. So if you were to switch some sort of measure, or you change the way that visualization looked, that could cause an issue with your dashboard, and you might have to go in and repin that.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? All right. Well, I will turn it back over to Audrey, and I appreciate everybody coming in and listening to our Collectiv Academy, and hopefully y'all come back and get some more great information.
Yes, thank you, Dennis. I will be sending out a recording and the PowerPoint slides for this shortly, so watch out for the email. And also be sure to check out our LinkedIn and YouTube pages and our future Collectiv Academy events. We have events for the rest of the year all about Power BI and other helpful tips. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you, everybody.